Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti from anthonymorganti.com, and this is part 5 of our Learn Lightroom 5 series. And in this episode we're going to be talking about sharpening and noise reduction. And before I jump into those panels, I wanted to show you what clarity does. I'm going to demonstrate it on this gray bar photograph, and I want you to look at the transition edge where this darker gray bar touches the lighter gray bar, right at that edge. As I move clarity up, you can see the light part gets lighter and the dark part gets darker. And what you're doing is you're increasing the contrast right in that transition edge, and that in effect makes your photograph look sharper. And as we jump down into the detail panel, what you'll see is something very similar, and it's just more refined. I'm going to zoom into the photograph, and I want you again to look at this transition edge. As I move sharpening up, you'll see the dark gets darker and the light gets lighter, but it does it a lot more refined. Instead of affecting this whole bar going out halfway, it just does it right at the edge. The other thing you'll notice is I move the amount slider all the way up. There's kind of a weird banding effect here, and that's because as you're making this edge lighter, right next to it then is going to be darker, so it's going to do it again and again and again, and it just radiates out. So that's why you don't want to put too much amount amount of sharpening in a photograph, because you're going to be introducing some weird noise like that. But I'm going to leave it up now so I could demonstrate these other sliders. Sharpening the amount is kind of like the volume control on your radio. You could turn it real high, you get real high volume, but it kind of gets obnoxious after a while. The radius slider, now I want you to again to keep looking at this transition edge. As I move that radius to the right, you'll see it gets thicker. And what that is in the it's the number of pixels that the amount slider is affecting. So it starts out at all the way down, it's half a pixel. And as you move it to the right, it goes all the way up to 3 pixels. So 3 pixels to the right, 3 pixels to the left are going to get lighter and darker to increase the contrast at that edge to make it look sharper. The detail slider, it's kind of hard to explain in words. I just want you to kind of look at it. As I move it to the right, you'll see that dark edge gets way darker and the light edge gets way lighter. See that? So in a real world situation, let's take a photograph of a model. You don't want to have the detail slider very high, because the pores of a model's skin, if you think of a pore, the inside of the pore is darker than the outside of the pore. If you turn detail way up, that inside of the pore is going to get darker, the outside of the pore is going to get lighter, and the pores, in doing that, the pores become more prominent. So you don't want, that's not very attractive. Where you'd want detail though is, it could be an animal's face, like maybe a gorilla's face or a lion's face. You want all the little hairs to show, so you would turn detail up. Masking, let me leave detail up for now. Masking is where you're masking off parts of the photograph that you don't want sharpening to affect at all. And where you would do this is if you had a landscape with an expansive blue sky, you would turn masking to the right, and it would mask out the expansive blue sky. Or on a photograph of a model's face, you could turn masking to the right and it won't affect maybe her face. And the way you apply masking is you typically would hold down the Alt or Option key on your keyboard when you hit the slider. And as I do that, you see that it turns completely white. With masking all the way down, the white indicates the part of the photograph where sharpening is being applied. As you move it to the right, you could quickly see that it quickly turns black with a white stripe down the middle. That transition edge right now is being sharpened, but on either side of it, it isn't being sharpened. So you're masking off either side of that edge. And as I move it more to the right, you'll see that the part that's being sharpened decreases. So you want to use masking when you have certain parts of your photograph that you do not want sharpened. Alright, we jump down to the noise reduction part, and there's two little subpanels here, luminance and color. And luminance noise is that grainy looking noise that's in the old old photographs, and you'll see grain. And it's noise that is in your image that looks like that. And the color is like a little red, green, and blue dots that are in the photograph, and those are more prominent in a real dark photograph. In the dark part, if you're photographing a room and it had a hallway going off into the back of the room, and it was getting dark back in that hallway, you could get some red, green, and blue dots, especially at higher ISOs. Again, this luminance slider, though, as you move it to the right, that's kind of like the volume control on the radio. It applies more and more noise reduction. And what it does, it just kind of blurs out the edges that you just sharpened. And it does it a little more and a little more. So that's why there's kind of a balance. You need to strike a balance between sharpening and noise reduction, because you could undo all your sharpening with your noise reduction. So as you move it to the right, it blurs out those edges a little bit. The next slider, the detail slider, it's in very noisy photos. If you move it to the right, it'll preserve, or in any photo I should say, not just noisy ones. As you move to the right, it preserves some fine detail. So if you took a photograph, and let's say you took a photograph of a gorilla and you were at like 1600 ISO, you're going to have some luminance noise in there. As you move it to the right with detail down, you're going to start blurring out his features. His eyelashes maybe will start blurring out. The hairs on his face will blur out. You could move detail to the right to try to preserve some of those images, but you won't get rid of all the noise. So it's kind of a balancing act there between these two sliders. The contrast is similar. You're going to preserve some contrast in the photograph as you move it to the right. So if you took a photograph of a zebra where there's a distinct contrast between the black and white stripes, as you move the luminance to the right, it's going to blur out that right where the black and white stripes touch each other. You can move detail to the right and preserve some of the individual hairs. Then you can move contrast to the right and try to preserve that contrast right at the edge where the two white and black stripes touch each other. And color noise reduction is a little easier. When you get a photograph and you have those little red, green, and blue dots in it, move this to the right until they're gone. If it starts to blur out your picture, you can move the detail to the right, and it will try to preserve some of the detail. So, in a nutshell, that's what these sliders do. And as I mentioned, it's kind of a balancing act, because you're going to want to move them in concert with the sharpening and try to get an overall balance of a sharp picture without any noise. Let's go on to a real-world example. This is a photograph of our cat Ed. And as you can see, there's some fine hairs, and you'd like to preserve that, but you don't want it too noisy either. And right out of the box, there's some sharpening that's already here, and I didn't do this. This is the sharpening that kind of the default sharpening numbers. To apply sharpening, what I typically do is I zoom in to 1:1, and you could see the individual hairs here. So as I move the sharpening up, I could see that the lighter parts of Eddie's fur get lighter and the darker parts get darker, just like I showed you on the gray bars. So as I move them up to the right, now I could see it got real contrasty. But moving it to the right, I also see now there's some, you probably can't see it on the video, but there is some noise, and there's some of these there's like blue dots here and there. So that's that color noise also. So I'm going to back that off until, it's the hairs I see are sharp to a point. So as I move it to the right, I can see the hairs are getting sharper and sharper and sharper, and then all of a sudden they're not sharpening anymore and I'm getting noise. So I'm going to back it off, and it's right around 70. And remember I told you in previous videos, before we got into the details of the detail panel, is just put sharpening at 70 and noise reduction at 40 and don't worry about it. And that's why I found that that is a pretty good spot to just do a good general sharpening of the photograph without introducing a lot of noise. Now in the radius slider, as we mentioned before, it makes the dark part wider and the white part wider. So it's going to increase the radius of where the sharpening is applied. Now in this case, since these are these fine hairs, we'd really like it small. So we want a smaller radius. And as I move that to the left, I'm pretty sure you can't see that in the video, but as I moved it to the left, I saw some definite noise reduction when I did that, because I'm applying the sharpening to a much smaller area of the contrast between the dark parts of his hair and the light parts. Now the detail too, now we mentioned that before, as you move that to the right, more and more detail, it's hard to explain in this photo, but the darker part gets even darker and the lighter part gets even lighter. And as I move it to the right, I'm getting the dark part of the noise is getting darker and the light part of the noise is getting lighter, so it's making it more prominent. Also, that these blue little specks are becoming more prominent too. So I'm going to keep detail pretty low until I see that noise is not as strong. Masking, I don't need all this black part. Here sharpened, I mean, I'm just making noise. I could see grain noise in there. So I hold the Option key down, and as I press it and as I move it to the right, you could see that the sharpening is becoming lesser in the dark areas and staying the same in the light areas. So I applied sharpening to here, but not to here. Now for noise reduction, I want to get rid of these blue spots, and so I could move the color noise reduction to the right. And in this case, they're pretty big, and it's going to be hard to get rid of them completely, but I almost did. They're just tiny little bit there. I could try now the detail to see if I could get rid of the rest of it with the detail slider, and yeah, it looks like moving the detail to the left, I got rid of it, pretty much all of it. Now there is some little grainy looking noise, especially right in here around his face, and I'm going to move the luminance slider, and this lags a little, I've noticed, so you gotta kind of go slow. If you go too quickly, you'll over noise reduction your photo and make it a little softer than you probably could have got away with. Right here now it looks like I got rid of all that noise, so that's it. I'm not going to do too much more on this. Now Eddie's properly sharpened. There's no noise in the photograph. It's a decent shot. Next we're going to go to a portrait. This is my son Nick, and I wanted to show you like the pores we were talking about before. As I zoom in, that's a little too much. As I move it over, you can see here in his pores here, as I apply some sharpening, you can see how the pores get more prominent and they're almost looking like painted on almost. I mentioned that the detail is where you could get some nasty looking pore activity, and you could see it's just looks horrible. So you want in a photograph a portrait, you want to keep detail low. Like you get detail too high and it's not very attractive. At this point, I'd like to mention that Lightroom comes with some presets um, for their sliders. So if you open up, or for the sharpening and noise reduction, if you open up this panel and you go into presets, and you go into Lightroom general presets, there's sharpen faces, sharpen scenic. And so obviously you're going to do sharpen faces. And as you could see, it did a nominal amount of sharpening. Radius around 1.4 pixels, which is probably the size of a pore, a little bigger. And the detail is very low, 15. Masking is relatively high, 60. Now this is a good starting point. You could further refine it um, by just remembering this number 15, and you could move the detail to the right, to the left, see if you get any better. What you'd want, obviously, sharpened on Nick here is you might want these fine hairs sharp, and you'd want his eyelashes sharp, his eyebrows sharp. But that's just to give you an idea. I wanted to show you how you could really make the pores. He'd look like Nick's an alien if you turned detail too high around with the amount too high. And you could see the hairs are nice and sharp, but he looks like he's a plastic man or something. So that's that. Next we'll go to a landscape. I wanted to show you the masking on a landscape. As I zoom out, you see we have this expansive blue sky. Let's apply some sharpening. What typically I would do though is I would zoom in to 1:1, and I would I want these grasses nice and sharp. So again, it seems like when I get up in here, the sharpening stops, and I start getting noise, especially right in here. I could see noise when I'm in the 80s. So I'm going to back it off till the noise goes away. Now I still even have noise around 50. So back it off a little more. Right there, right around 49. Yeah, there's still a tiny bit, but I'll live with that. I could get rid of that with the noise reduction. But we've added sharpening. The radius, now I want it relatively small because there is some fine detail here, but it's not like the hairs on a gorilla's face. So we'll just bring it up a little bit, maybe in the 1.5 area here. And tell you the truth, as I look at it, I really can't see anything change. And you'll find that. Don't freak out because you don't see anything. It's just the way it is. The detail, again, remember, it makes the lighter part even lighter and the darker part even darker. As I move that, I could see a little change, especially in here in these different areas where we have this real light part and this little darker part. Now the masking is what I wanted to really show you in this photograph. Is again, you hold the Alt or Option key down, and when you move the masking to the right, and you could see that the sky now is not sharpened at all. And even parts where I was getting that noise before in the back part of the pond, that part is getting less sharpened. You could see the big dark line going across the back of the pond. So remember when I was getting noise in here, and as you could see, when I masked it, it's getting less sharpening applied back there, so that noise probably is lesser. And as we move down, now this is 4:1, and I could still, there's still a little noise here. So we go to the luminance noise reduction, and I move that to the right. Like I mentioned, this lags right around 29. It's still a tiny bit. Well, let me go a little more. Let's be fussy about it. Tell you the truth, I'd probably say that's good enough, but right around 36, it's pretty well gone. I could check the detail and see if I could detail doesn't seem to be doing anything. So double click on the slider, it returns it back to where it was. Contrast, I don't see anything happening there either. You'll find that sometimes. In certain photographs it doesn't seem to do anything. There's really no color noise in this photograph, so I'm just going to leave that alone. And that's it. This photograph now is properly sharpened and noise reduction applied. Now, I know this is I don't know the words I'm looking for, but it's kind of a difficult concept to put your head around, this sharpening and noise reduction. I mentioned in every single video I think I made on Lightroom 5, you could just move sharpening to around 70, leave these sliders where they were to begin with, move noise reduction to around 40, and keep these sliders where they were, and you'll pretty much have a pretty nicely sharpened picture without any noise. You could also use the presets that come in Lightroom. They're under the general presets, and there's two of them, one for faces and one for scenic. And you could try those as a starting point. So if you got a landscape, click on that. It'll automatically apply landscape sharpening that Adobe has preloaded. And then you could play with the amount sliders and just adjust them a little bit to try to tweak it. But that's it. This is the sharpening noise reduction panel in Lightroom 5. I hope this helps. I know it's kind of maybe overcomplicated, but like I mentioned, you could always use the presets or dial in 70 on sharpening and 40 on noise reduction and be done with it. I really appreciate you guys watching, and the emails I get encouraging me to make more, and I really enjoy making them, and I know I kind of sound like a dork sometimes, but I hope that aside, you're getting some useful information from these Learn Lightroom videos I'm doing. In the next video, I'm going to be talking about the clone tool in Lightroom 5, which is new for Lightroom 5. They improved it, and we're going to show its usefulness and its limitations in the next video. So I hope you tune in for that. Stop over to anthonymorganti.com. There's a lot of articles and videos on photography, and the whole idea, I'm just trying to help you guys become better photographers, and I appreciate everyone's support, and I appreciate you guys visiting the website and looking at the videos on YouTube. Until next time, take care.